One of the things that I have enjoyed very much over the last few years, and particularly over the last few months, is getting to know Montessori educators, Montessori parents, people who love this approach to children as much as I do through online communities, through Facebook groups, through blogs, through LinkedIn posts. Throughout the online community, there's a lot of Montessori folks talking. And one of the issues that has come up recently, and I think probably comes up repeatedly over time, is the question of, is Montessori easy? Is this something that's easy to do? And I think that this is a question that has a lot of different answers. So I'm going to give a few different ones. The first one is no, it's not easy, but it's doable and it's worth it. And if you're talking about preparing an environment for 3 to 6-year-olds, or preparing an environment for 6 to 9-year-olds or 9 to 12-year-olds, and making that environment complete, making that serve those children for several hours a day as their home base of education, it's not easy. There's too many pieces for it to be easy, and there's too many things that are required of the adults who are an essential part of that prepared environment to say that this is an easy task. So, why do we do it? We do it because it's so valuable. It is so incredibly valuable. And the promise of Montessori education is so great that it is completely worth it. There's a couple of points that I want to make on that. And then, as I said, I'm going to give a couple of different answers to this question because I think it's very important. If you're a Montessori parent, if you are sending your child to a Montessori school that you feel good about, you can kind of just listen to this and relax a little bit, because I will foreshadow one of my later answers, which is doing a Montessori approach to parenting is hard in the short run and easier in the long run. So this is a complicated answer. Let's go back to that environment. One of the most important things that has to happen in a Montessori environment is a very precise set of learning materials must be made available so the children can do the important work of self-education. If the materials are too many or too few, if they are not the right quality of material, they are not going to support the children in becoming the people that they can be. The promise of Montessori education is nothing less than world peace. Now that may seem like a big leap to some of you, but for those of you who have experienced this, who've watched children who have come into a classroom with their emotions in a jumble, with their behavior a chaotic mess, for lack of a better word. The child is not the mess, but the behavior is. If you've seen that happen, and then seen that same child a few months later, or even a few years later, and seen what a different being they appear to be, if you've seen their true, peaceful, creative nature come out, you know that this is a legitimate promise. This is something we can create in this world through Montessori education. So even though it's not easy, it is worth it. And let's think about that for a minute. What is it that makes this promise? What is it that will allow us to genuinely create a peaceful world through educating our children in a different way? First and most important is that we stop doing violence to them. We stop intruding on them. We stop interrupting them. We stop forcing our will on them and allow them to develop their own will. Allow them to develop their own inner guidance. Allow them to follow their own interests to the fruition of creative expression and contribution in their community. What does it take to do that? It takes a lot. That prepared environment is one of those pieces that is not going to be easy to put together. It's going to be either expensive or time-consuming or both. And that is one of the things that needs to be recognized. Because what is the 3 to 6 prepared environment going to do? Well, it's going to refine that child's senses so their awareness of other people and situations is much greater than most people's in this community, in this world is right now. That takes very specific materials to do, and it takes a way of presenting them at the right ages, in the right ways to accomplish that. What else is that 3 to 6 environment designed to do? Well, one of the things it's designed to do is to make sure that by the time that child is 12 years old, so they've gone through 3 years in the 3 to 6 environment, 3 in the 6 to 9, and 3 in the 9 to 12, that they have accomplished learning all of the skills and content that, at least for Montessori's time, was typically learned in the entire schooling period. Yep, that's all. No big deal. Yes, it is a big deal, but it is doable. But it's only doable if someone in that environment has prepared the environment properly and then can support that kind of work. If they can recognize why the children must be in the environment from the age of 2.5 or 3 to be ready to read effortlessly at 4.5 or 5.5, writing before they're reading with the use of these materials that they choose on their own. Only then can they be coming into the 6 to 9 environment reading reasonably well, ready to take off with the interests of their own as they're presented the great lessons that inspire their interest and their excitement about the things that they're going to learn. Only if they already have a sensorial grounding through the materials in the decimal system, in all of the basic building blocks of geometry, only then can they take off and run with that in the 6 to 9 and the 9 to 12 environment. This is not easy. This is complicated, but it's so worth it. Now, I mentioned when I was talking to how I'm going to foreshadow a slightly different answer to this question for parents, that in Montessori parenting, the hard part comes at the beginning and then gets much easier. This is true for Montessori education as well. We are able, if we prepare these environments properly, if we stop intruding on these children, and if we give them the opportunity to normalize their personalities through concentrated work they've chosen themselves, if we do this early on, we can have larger classes that are completely well supported with fewer educators in the class. We can have larger classes using one set of Montessori materials so that our cost goes down, our effort goes down once this method is fully implemented. So this is something that we can do to actually bring the cost of education down, to bring the number of adults that we need ready to serve these children down over time, as people understand why you could have 35 children in a class, ages 6 to 9, and most of the time that they're not needing very much from you. They need the lessons that you're going to provide for them, but otherwise they're supporting each other, and even more so in the 9 to 12 environment. Now, some of you may be saying, well, why do we need to rush? Well, this isn't a rush. That's kind of the point. What I believe we see happening, particularly in public schools, is that the children are rushing from age 6 to try and do all that they need to do before they get to the teen years. And the reason that I say that is we have some children who are school-oriented, who are fine with the environment in the middle schools and the high schools, and they kind of chug along and do okay. But that's not true for most children, because developmentally, that's not the time for them to be learning those skills. The time for them to be learning those skills is earlier, but the only way they're not rushing is if you're starting early enough with developmentally appropriate materials. We are not rushing reading. We are not rushing math. We're not rushing the decimal system. We're providing golden beads for you to learn what 1,000 is and how that is different from 100 or a 10 or a unit. This is wonderful stuff. This is stuff that the children love to do if it's presented to them in the right time frame and in the right way and with the right materials. So I believe that we can fulfill the promise of Montessori education. We can do it in a way that works for children of all economic segments. We can do it in a way that actually costs less over the long run to those who are funding the education that's happening. But it's not easy. It's something that's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of attention from a lot of dedicated people. And the other piece that makes this not an easy thing at all is the preparation of the adults involved. Most of the adults who are going to be supporting the children in these prepared environments did not have the benefit of coming through a prepared environment. Most of them were used to people intruding on them throughout their educational experience. Most of them do not have the model internalized in their bones of treating children with respect to the degree that you don't touch a child without that child's permission. Now, the permission may be implicit. It may not be saying it every time, probably isn't, but it is waiting for permission to touch that child. That level of respect, that level of attention, that reflex to respect and to support and to nurture rather than to intrude is not natural to most of the adults that are going to be working in Montessori education, and it's not easy. It's something that requires a lot of support. It's something that requires effort on the part of those adults, and it's something that requires a prepared environment of Montessori training to help them have the support they need to make those leaps, to make those internal transformations. That is something that anyone who's been involved with Montessori education for more than a few months has probably run into and has at least some understanding of this important concept. You have to transform as an adult to do this. You cannot act from your habits. You cannot act from your history. You cannot act from the things that were done to you as a child and modeled on you as a child for most of you. Some of you are fortunate. Some of you came up through Montessori education yourself, and so you've got maybe a little bit ahead of the rest of the people in this regard. And maybe you just had a really intuitively wise upbringing, and so you don't have quite as much to do here. But for most adults, this is a big deal. This is in some ways simple, but it's not easy. And to say that it is, I think, discounts what we need to do to fulfill the promise of Montessori education. So is creating a Montessori school environment for any age group easy? No, but it is doable and it is worth it. So now let's give a slightly different answer. What about Montessori parenting? What about supporting children in a home who have a prepared environment at school that they go to for 3 hours a day, 6 hours a day, whatever the school day is for those children? Is it easy to parent them in a Montessori way at home? The answer here is not at first, but later, yes. Because at first, you have to take care of that last obstacle that I mentioned about Montessori classroom professionals. You have to transform yourself. You have to recognize where you have been intruded on as an adult. You have to recognize, possibly, depending on the age of your children, how you have been intruding on your children up until this point. And you have to make some of those shifts. And that's not easy. But it is very doable. And it's more doable now than any other time in U.S. history anyway, because we have more people who can support you, even if your local community is not very much of a support. Maybe you drive your child to a Montessori school far away and you're not very involved with those parents. You have online support. You have online communities that can help you to recognize what you need to do, how you need to do it, and to support you when you mess up, and recognize that, hey, we're all going to mess up. Montessori herself said that she was harsher with some of the children than she should have been. We all mess up, and then we just have to reground ourselves in the principles of respectful parenting or respectful educating and go on from there. Also, preparing the home environment takes a little bit up front, needing to make sure that children can get to all the things that they need to do. You may need to be doing some organizing of the way that your children are going to participate in maintaining the home environment. But once you've done that, it's actually easier. Once you've got family meetings set up and you recognize that your children are part of a community, all of the members of which contribute and all of the members of which gain some of their most important satisfaction from making those contributions, then you realize that it's not all on you. It's their responsibility too, and they want to contribute. When I was a student, I had gone back to college and I had a family meeting, and my older son was just made a wonderful gesture that I will never forget. We sat down and we talked about all the cleaning that needed to be done in our home. And we talked about what I was doing and what other people were doing, including his younger brother, who was able to do some, but not as much as he was, obviously, as about, I think he was about 9 at this time. And he took on pretty much triple the amount of work that he'd been doing before that meeting. And he followed through. He did those things, and my life immediately, as a student, single mother, became easier. These are the kinds of things that happen when you do Montessori parenting in the way that it's meant to be done. It's not easy up front, but it's easy, it's easier over time, and it's doable, and it is so worth it. So I encourage you, as you look at some of these resources online that say, oh, learn Montessori education in 27 days, or, it's not that big a deal to switch your conventional childcare center to a Montessori center. Take all that with a grain of salt. Look a little deeper. Recognize that this is something that's complicated, it takes work, but the rewards are beyond measure.
Thanks for coming and visiting. My name is Pamela Rigg. I've been involved in Montessori education for nearly 40 years. And about 30 years I started developing materials really out of my Montessori elementary training. I'd like to show you a little bit about what's called Montessori three-part cards. Three-part cards for the child under 6 is different than the elementary level three-part card. This is kind of fun. For example, if I were going to introduce a younger child, 6 or below, to like flags of North America, I would have what is sometimes called the control card, the card with the picture and the word with it, and then separately I would have the younger child simply match the picture to the picture. Then a little bit later, I can add the word. So the child is really doing picture-to-picture matching, and then this is called a graphing. It doesn't mean they have to read it. They're looking at the way letters are formed, and they're matching the grapheme on the control card to the label word, and then placing it here. So this is a three-part card because there are 1, 2, 3 parts for the younger child, the child under 6. Now, for elementary, Montessori also has a three-part card, but it looks a little bit differently. I'll select a somewhat easier one. I'm going to introduce Africa. So here's the picture of Africa, and the child has already used a puzzle map, a globe with the same shape, and has learned the word Africa for that shape. So the continent is now introduced two-dimensionally on the picture card, and they can match the word. There's no control card. There isn't a card with the picture and the label attached. It's simply the picture and the word. And then we also add what is sometimes called the definition card. So the child, they're 6 to 9 years old, they're reading. So it adds that level of difficulty of reading, and they can practice their reading skills. So this is the classic elementary three-part card. Many of the Montessori preschool and elementary materials use that same three-part card format. We'll walk over here for a moment, and you'll notice the kind of introduction to reading. For me, this is a lot of fun because I've worked with actually children 2.5 to 3 years old with this. Because we start, again, we have our three-part card format. I'm going to select one that's a little easier. That's really pretty. It says wet. But for the video, I think it might be easier to see this. So here's a pen. So we start off with vocabulary. So with a child or a small group of children, I would have a set of little cards, actually rather large cards, with pictures, and we just talk about what the picture is. A pen, a jet, a web, red. So it's first vocabulary development. Then the child uses it as picture matching. So they have the picture, in fact, a series of, say, 4 to 6 of these pictures that they lay out in a row, and then they have a stack of pictures to match. So they're matching the picture to the picture. A little later, we do what I had showed you earlier with the continent. They're going to then just, let me just shuffle this a teeny bit. They're going to match the grapheme, the shape of the word, to the picture. And so the children progress through a series of pictures like this that are pretty handsome but clear for the child to see what it is. And we, in the company I have, we have 12 of each vowel sound. So you'll notice the words are simple consonant, vowel, consonants. And there's 12 of the A, 12 of the E, and so on through the 5 vowels. And they first learn the vocabulary, and then they match the picture to the picture, and then later they're going to match the word. Are they reading? No, but they're becoming sophisticated visually in the matching of the shapes of the letters of our alphabet. And then when they move to the kind of formally to the first step of reading, where they're using what we call, and I don't have it here, the movable alphabet, they'll encounter these same pictures, and they'll have, we call it movable alphabet because it's little wooden letters of the alphabet, and the child will know this is a pen, and look for the eh and the N and form the word pen. Later, they'll encounter the same pictures with the word, and we call it their first picture book, where they get to actually look at a picture and read. What does this say, job? Top.
One of the things that I have found over the years is that almost all classroom educators in the Montessori classroom need some help now and then. And particularly as the Montessori program, the Montessori way of education is growing in popularity with parents in our public schools, with charter schools it's becoming very popular as a charter school to open in the states that have these as an option for parents. I'm seeing more and more need for someone to come in and help classroom educators do their best and still have a life. One of the ways that we have to make sure that we take care of our educators is by having them be as efficient and effective as they can be in the classroom, so that they've got time to renew themselves, to rest. And one of the ways that that can happen is by helping them realize what's most important. That is one of the best ways that a consultant, a mentor for a classroom educator can come in and help them to do their best. Now, over the years, I have done consulting at different schools in Utah, California, some other places, and what I am finding is that it's very challenging, particularly for the schools and the classrooms that need consultations the most, to be able to afford them. Also, we are seeing more and more parts of the United States and parts of the world embracing Montessori education when they don't have established schools, much less established training centers. So who is going to support them? Who's going to help them get that important information that they need to succeed? Well, I believe that a Montessori consulting co-op is the way to do this. What we have put together is a way to have several different resources working together with a group of schools sharing a Montessori consultant or a group of consultants. Now, one of the ways that this, I believe, will be more effective than consulting in a traditional way is because of all the different ways that the classroom educators as well as Montessori administrators can get the resources they need when they need them.